And all of a sudden, we still have 60 days, and we've had 60 days for
23 years,
20
yeah.
years. Look at what splits and zones have done to amplify that 60 days. I'll pick on Missouri, my home state again. We have 3 zones, and 2 of the zones in the last year had a split. So effectively, in the state of Missouri, we have the beginning of our hunting seasons in the north zone in late October, and now this next year, the season will extend till the end of January. So we essentially have about a 95-day window in one state, which the birds, not all in the same spot, but within the state.
Which,
Dale Humberg put together some data going back to 1961. And by the way, in these discussion, I think in the final product, you're going to show some slides that will be incorporated into it, and we're going to have a couple of these for the audience to look at. And one of which will be a sequence from 1961 until 2018 of the number of days and the number of splits and the number of zones. And when you add it up, as someone said before, from the first day of September until especially the end of January, these birds are exposed to ducks are exposed to non-stop pressure. Non-stop pressure is there. And so we may not have increased it from 60 and 6 for 23 years, but by God, we've increased the actual hunting impact by a lot. Maybe by as much as a third because of the additional splits and zones and other regulatory aspects of it. So it's another thing a lot of people don't think about, And then we get into this late season business. I personally hate us hunting after about the middle of January. I know people in the South don't want to hear this. Part of my own PhD work, some other work Rick Kaminsky, student at Mississippi State, did, and others. The adults tend to pair first. Obviously, they, older, more experienced, a little more genetically, hormonally prepared. Coming into fall, young birds are still teenagers and that sort of stuff. You know what I'm talking about, not quite ready to get on with it. So the adults tend to pair first, and they tend to pair with each other. And also, we know from long-term banding studies and work with wood ducks and canvasbacks and lesser snow geese and black ducks and so forth, about 20 to 30% of all the adult females produce 70 to 80% of young. So every duck's not the same. You get it? So that 20% or 30% of the females that produces a disproportionate part of the recruitment for the following year typically are adults. And like Mergini, the sea ducks and other ducks, is probably those that are 2 or 3 years old. Geese is certainly that way. 3 and 4, 5-year-olds are more productive than 2-year-olds when they don't mate at all. The point being is that the early pair is usually adults, more productive, tend to get in better body condition. We've shown this with our studies and monitoring body fat levels and so forth. They get ready to get on with the world quicker. They molt quicker in winter. They store the fat earlier. They tend to migrate earlier in spring. They arrive on the breeding grounds earlier in the spring. Those birds typically are more productive. If they have to renest, they have a greater renesting probability, Dave. The bottom line is they end up producing more young. So with mallards and pintails, as someone said, the pair formation actually starts in fall migration, and typically for mallards, by about the end of November, probably 80% plus of the adult females in particular are already paired by the 1st of December. So when we kill one member of the pair, let's say even in early January, then the surviving member, assuming one of them still lives, has got to find another mate, okay? Well, think about it. I use this analogy, and I don't want this to be seen as an inappropriate comment here, but use the analogy of okay, You go in the bar at 7 o'clock and you have a lot of folks to interact with and one thing and another. Well, anyway, what happens if all of a sudden you end up kind of looking around and it's 11:30 or 12 o'clock, the bar's going to close in half an hour? It's kind of like, well, what's your choice? What's kind of left? And anyway, these birds that have to form pairs again, getting into January, February, who's left? It's a lot of young birds, probably birds that aren't as good a condition. They're set back in their annual cycle events. They're not going to be as productive. And so consequently, the effect of killing a hen in particular in January is very different than the effect of killing a hen in December than killing a hen in November. Consequently, this whole pair formation process and hunting timing is of concern to those of us that get into that sort of level of detail. So here we are, promoting later seasons. And how many duck hunters that are probably watching this are thinking, we want a later season. We live in Louisiana, we live in Arkansas, we want a later season. And now we've got the senator from Mississippi advocating, and that happened before, of wanting a later season. Fortunately, it didn't happen back when that happened many years ago, but bit by bit we're creeping. And so now we've got potentially a special couple of day seasons for kids or a couple of day seasons for veterans or something up into the middle of February. Nothing against kids and veterans. I have a son that's a disabled veteran, but by God, that's wrong. I mean, that's not right. That's not the way we ought to be managing this resource. We need to be thinking about the biology of this whole set of enterprise that we call waterfowl conservation, and making decisions that way. So this whole business about pressure and so forth is a lot more than just dead ducks.
And to add to that, the pressure for later hunting seasons, I can tell you, at this juncture was opposed by Louisiana and Arkansas, but was carried by other states. And I have on a number of occasions, the last time in April at a meeting in Abbeville, had to go through similar explanations, obviously not as technically supported as the one Mickey just gave us. And that is that ducks using our habitat after the duck season closes is not a bad thing, nor is it representative of piss-poor harvest management that I am indeed accused of pretty regular. Ducks have things to accomplish in the winter. They do not come to Louisiana to provide us things to shoot at.
The philopatry, the tradition of birds coming back, as we've kind of danced around several times, is affected by many things. Again, their experience, they're learning. These are birds that are sampling, learning, looking every day for that matter, and certainly every year if they're multiple year animals. And so after the hunting season, that habitat is so critical, and that's why we need to continue to provide that habitat after hunting seasons. I heard someone say, they were talking about, maybe this short-stopping notion, something. Well, what if Missouri, at the end of their hunting season, would just drain all their wetlands? That would cause all the ducks to go farther south. Man, that'd be a great thing. We just drain all, and that way they won't have to stay in that damn corn up in Missouri, and we'll just drain it all, and then they'll fly farther south. You dummies! I mean, are you really serious? I mean, think about it. The whole reason we've got the habitat and the base and the resource and everything we're doing is to take care of the birds, and now we're going to take it away from them? I mean, that's just about the stupidest thing I ever heard. So, that habitat in late winter and in spring is so critical for these birds, and to maintain and protect that habitat and to keep it freedom from disturbance even in spring is pretty darn important.
This push by hunters for a later duck season is based in just a gross misunderstanding of the migration as a whole.
It is.
How bad do you wish you had a dime for every time you heard someone say, boy, pintails are just now getting here?
Oh yeah,
You'd be a rich man.
I'd have many boat motor rig, like we were talking the other day, there's so many people, I've heard it for years, duck season ends, people drain fields, they drain the woods. Now you go up and down the road and there's a pile of mallards in the road ditch. Man, ducks are just getting here. Season's supposed to be open. Well, no, fool, they've been here probably since the middle of November, and they got to go somewhere.
Yeah.
It's just bad thinking, and that's part of what we have to do is say, look, folks, these ducks have been here, they're using these areas, they're using what habitat is available. As we take it away, they shift and move around, and they're there.
There's a lot of early birds there. They may not be exactly where you hunt, I mean, we talk multiple times about Halloween mallards. We talk about, what my dad always talked about, the midpoint between the solstice and the equinox. There are birds that migrate early. I mean, the photoperiod ducks exist, and we can hunt them early. It's not one of those deals where, man, if we could just hunt February, we'd kill more. I mean,
It's going to kill less, really.
yeah, it's a misunderstanding.
Every day you get past, in my opinion, I had old buddy used to always say, if you don't got them by Christmas, you're probably not going to get them. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. Now, that being said, really extreme weather events will continue to push them south, no doubt. But you get that time of year, once the daylight starts getting a little longer every day, they're wanting to go back, and folks at home that's shooting pintails, man, pintails just getting here in January. No, they were just with our buddies in Louisiana the other day.
He may be just getting to you, but what direction did he come from?
That's exactly right. But it also makes me wonder, Mick, back to, as we talk about habitat expansion, I know you're probably going to get into this, and we talk about trying to increase habitat wherever you can, whether it be the mid-latitude states or here. And I hate to use the big gorilla in the room shortstopping again. However, there's something like that seems to be happening. And we talked about it yesterday in the boat about ducks learn. And you think about traditional wintering areas, the Grand Prairie area of Arkansas, the Louisiana coastal marsh, wintering ducks, wintering birds. As these ducks, if they don't get there to the traditional wintering areas, what happens long run? What's the long-term look for all that? So if we're not training them to get here, they're not showing up. How does that affect not only the traditional areas but the heritages? What's the long-term look of that? Nobody has a crystal ball, but we all have ideas. So how does that work?
Well, and from the biology standpoint, again, I'll go back and Larry had referenced this too, the evolutionary ecology of the bird. That evolutionarily they became adapted to using certain locations at certain time for certain resources. And that enabled them to survive, to go through their annual events, and to be in a good state for reproductive potential. So all the way from boreal forest to Louisiana, these resources were important for the birds at certain times for certain events, for certain types of foods or resources they were getting. So it's like a chain. So is there a weak link someplace in this? And so any part of that flyway that ends up having a weak link has the potential of having a disruptive effect on the other links. So if something goes bad in the prairie pothole country, we know it's going to have an effect on how many birds are going to get in Louisiana. Similarly, if we have poor habitat, and we've, part of my background, history of the cross-seasonal effects, we know that when we have poor conditions in the winter, we have less young ducks the following year, and the survival rate actually goes down. We know that. So there's a weak link there. Some things happen in the middle of the continent. So say we have bad habitat in the Illinois River Valley, or all of a sudden Reelfoot Lake went dry, or Catahoula's not in good shape this year, or whatever. It has an effect on the other part of the annual cycle. Again, back to the point of the continental resource and the continental management. It's also why we don't let states set their own seasons independent in some respects of another state, because their seasons does have an effect on the other part. So we need to be thinking about it all along. So Jim, your point about what effect, if you want to call it that, of something happening in one spot, is it really that bad or not? My answer is long-term from the evolutionary ecology of the bird, yeah, it is bad because it's a disruption. Now, having said that, the world's changing. The world, it's not going to be static. Larry talked about the dynamics. The birds are adapting to it, and they will adapt. And some of the adaptations, again with climate and stuff, are beyond our control. Other changes have just naturally occurred because of other factors, maybe sea level rise that would not affect blah, blah, blah. So the birds are adapting, moving, and some of those things are natural, and that's okay. But when we have a change that's not natural, when we have a change that's because of some factor, and maybe it is in this case pressure, because we're on this subject, if in fact that is disrupting the distribution pattern, that is potentially something we can affect. And that again gets back to the point of what are the things we can do something about, what are the things we can't do something about, and understanding kind of the differences and being optimistic going forward and thinking about what we can do. So everybody's a part of this enterprise in one way or the other.